Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. I've spent a fair bit of time over the last year or so exploring the world of external GPUs. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago I published my review of the latest Gigabyte RX 580 gaming box. But this whole time I've been testing eGPUs and exploring how they perform. I just can't shake the thought that they just aren't very good, and in most circumstances don't make a lot of sense to buy. The whole idea behind external GPUs is a good one. In theory, you can plug in an external graphics processor to a system that has a weak GPU and immediately get gaming grade graphics performance. This makes eGPUs sound like a fantastic option for those that have an ultrabook with integrated graphics or just want a super portable gaming setup. After all, eGPUs are generally quite compact and designed as an add-on to slim and light systems. While this is a great theory and an idea that I think has a lot of potential, right now eGPUs don't work like this in practice. There are a bunch of fundamental flaws to the technologies that facilitate external graphics, and that makes current generation products either poor value or just not a good option over alternatives for PC gaming. Almost all of the blame goes to Thunderbolt 3. It's a super fast interconnect and great for attaching high-speed storage devices, high-resolution displays, and other peripherals that require fast data transfer rates, but it's just not fast enough for GPUs. Thunderbolt 3 presents bandwidth and latency limitations that choke the living daylights out of a graphics card, forming the single largest bottleneck for any eGPU equipped system. The way eGPUs work is they utilize Thunderbolt 3's 4 lanes of PCI Express 3.0, so the GPU can connect and operate over a familiar protocol. A cursory glance would suggest the maths checks out too. Thunderbolt 3 is a 40 gigabit per second protocol, and PCIe 3.0 times 4 requires just 31.5 gigabit per second. However, this does not take into account several key differences between Thunderbolt 3 and raw PCIe. Thunderbolt 3 operates through the chipset, so it's not a direct connection to the CPU like the standard PCIe lanes you use to connect a GPU in a desktop system. On top of that, there is typically an additional Thunderbolt controller at both ends of the cable. When you factor in all these additional steps and chips between the CPU and GPU and the added protocols of Thunderbolt 3, you don't get anywhere near 40 gigabit per second of bandwidth for the GPU. The bandwidth left for the GPU typically sits between 17 and 21 gigabit per second in a real-world memory copy test, compared to 26 gigabit per second for direct-to-CPU PCIe 3.0 times 4. That's roughly 30% more bandwidth from a direct connection, and let's not forget that we're talking about just PCIe 3.0 times 4 here, not the full times 16 you'd get from a desktop slot. We know from TechPowerUp's previous testing that a GTX 1080 running over a PCIe 3.0 times 4 interface will be capped to about 96% of its full times 16 performance. So when you cut bandwidth by a further 25% or so thanks to Thunderbolt 3, more of that performance erodes. But bandwidth is only one part of the story. The real killer is latency. When you add in the chipset, Thunderbolt 3 controllers, and the length of the cable itself, there's a massive uptick in communications latency between the GPU and other components. In a desktop PC, the GPU is physically situated very close to the CPU and communicates over direct PCIe lanes. That's not the case at all with eGPUs, where the GPU connects through the chipset and data is transmitted over longer cables. The bandwidth limit, but more importantly the added latency, caps any eGPU's performance to around 70 to 80% of what the GPU inside is actually capable of when packed into a true gaming desktop or laptop. And it doesn't matter whether the eGPU is a GTX 1060 or a GTX 1080 Ti, any GPU placed into a Thunderbolt 3 enclosure immediately loses about 20% of its performance in the best case scenarios. And in the most latency impacted games like Prey, the performance hit is more like 50% or greater. And when you start asking Thunderbolt 3 to do more on top of transmitting data to and from the GPU, for example, using the included USB or Ethernet ports on some eGPU enclosures, you start running into issues because there's just not enough bandwidth. You'll either experience a performance hit and stuttering in games, or the USB port simply won't work or will cut out at random times. And you especially shouldn't pass a display signal from the GPU back through the Thunderbolt 3 cable to your laptop's built-in display. This is a supported feature of eGPUs, but again, the lack of available bandwidth to send the return display signal leads to a noticeable performance loss in games. This means that to get the most out of your eGPU, you need to hook up an external monitor directly to one of the GPU's display outputs. And for those that don't already have a monitor, it's an added cost on top of the eGPU purchase price. As it stands right now, Thunderbolt 3 is just not suited to external graphics technologies. It imposes far too many restrictions on bandwidth, latency, and attached devices such that it limits the performance and usability of external GPU enclosures. To make these sorts of enclosures worth the time and money, we really need a next-gen connector technology, something like Thunderbolt 4 with double the bandwidth and most importantly, a significant latency reduction. The next-gen Thunderbolt is probably a fair way away, but if it can provide a near full PCIe ×8 connection with latency much closer to a desktop PC, eGPUs wouldn't have anywhere near as high a performance penalty, and overall they'd make much more sense. Now you might be wondering, what about those direct PCIe adapters you can buy that transform an M.2 slot or a mini PCIe slot into a full PCIe ×16 slot, running at 4 times speeds in this case for external GPUs? Well, these are better in theory as they provide a more direct connection, but in practice they are not particularly plug and play as you need a cable dangling out of your exposed laptop. Also, Steve bought one and couldn't get it to work with several different laptops, so there seems to be a few compatibility issues there at the moment. The other issue with eGPUs is their price. When you factor in the performance an eGPU delivers relative to its cost, buying an eGPU makes very little sense for most people compared to other ways of getting gaming capable systems. Let's say you want a system capable of playing basic games like Fortnite, Overwatch, or CSGO, and you don't want to spend a boatload of cash. If you go the eGPU route, you'll need to spend at least $200 on the enclosure and then grab a GPU like the GTX 1050, which these days costs around $150. So all up, the eGPU is costing you $350, and then on top of that, you need a laptop with Thunderbolt 3 and an external display. Now, when you factor in the performance penalty of using an eGPU through Thunderbolt 3, that GTX 1050 is going to fall closer to NVIDIA's popular integrated GPU, the MX150. The eGPU will probably be around 10 to 20% faster, but the MX150 is still capable of playing games like Fortnite on medium level quality presets. Realistically, there's not much point buying the GTX 1050 eGPU if you have an MX150 or greater discrete GPU, so it's only worth buying for those that are stuck with integrated graphics. And even then, you'd need to already have a Thunderbolt 3 equipped laptop without integrated graphics to consider buying this eGPU combo. If you don't have that laptop, my advice would be to buy a laptop with a discrete GPU inside, either the MX150 or preferably a true GTX 1050. Thunderbolt 3 laptops are already in the upper end of pricing, and there are plenty of nice thin and light options with the MX150 or even up to a GTX 1050 Ti inside at a similar price point. If you want that sort of entry-level to mid-tier gaming experience in a portable form factor, there's not much point buying a laptop plus eGPU when gaming-capable portable laptops already exist. Higher-end discrete GPUs make even less sense, if I'm honest. Take the Aorus GTX 1070 gaming box, which retails for $600 US. With the Thunderbolt 3 penalty, you're looking at performance around or below the level of a GTX 1060 6GB gaming laptop. Considering you already need an external display to get the best eGPU performance, why buy one at all over a complete and fully upgradable gaming desktop, even on a budget? Here is a basic gaming system I made for around $600 that includes a quad-core Ryzen 3 2200G CPU, 8GB of RAM, and a GTX 1060 3GB. This PC will perform about as well as the eGPU hooked up to a laptop sporting Thunderbolt 3, except it's a full gaming system. The eGPU requires a laptop to function, so you'll either need to already have a compatible laptop, or you'll need to buy one on top of the $600 asking price for just the eGPU. It's a no-brainer to build the desktop if you don't already have a compatible laptop, but even then, if you do already have one of the compatible laptops, buying a desktop PC over an eGPU gives you much greater scope for upgrades in the future without compromising on performance for gaming right now. Now, of course, for some people that want portability and a compact setup, a full gaming desktop isn't going to be what you're after. But even if portability is your chief concern, it makes more sense to buy a proper gaming laptop. GTX 1060 laptops are available for below $1,000 these days, which is again less than the cost of a Thunderbolt 3 laptop plus a GTX 1070 eGPU, and you'll be getting better performance anyway. The only reason I could see an eGPU making sense is if you meet several very specific criteria. You'd need to already own a slim and light laptop with Thunderbolt 3 that doesn't have a powerful discrete GPU, and you need to be unwilling to purchase a similarly priced and arguably more powerful gaming desktop because you want the portability of an eGPU configuration. You'd also need to be unwilling to ditch your existing laptop for a portable gaming laptop, or unwilling to buy a second laptop for gaming for just a few $100s more than an eGPU. If you don't already own a laptop, or if you're thinking of upgrading from something incompatible with eGPUs, for example, if it doesn't have Thunderbolt 3, my advice would be to buy a fully integrated system that meets your gaming needs rather than an eGPU. That's either a full gaming desktop in addition to whatever laptop you want, as I've described previously, or just a laptop with an appropriate discrete GPU inside. There are plenty of options on the market for those that want entry-level experiences all the way up to powerful desktop-grade hardware, and often it'll be cheaper than buying an eGPU on top of a laptop without discrete graphics. Even though I don't recommend an eGPU for most buyers, I still think the concept has some merit and could be a decent option once the technology matures. If you could buy a cheap enclosure that uses a next-gen Thunderbolt technology, allowing the GPU inside to provide its full desktop-class performance, it would be a neat way to upgrade a laptop's graphics without needing to buy a whole new system. That was the goal of these Thunderbolt 3 enclosures, but unfortunately, it'll be a while before it becomes a genuine reality. Anyway, that's it for this video on GPUs. Let me know your thoughts on external graphics in the comments below. I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say on this sort of technology at the moment. Don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content. Consider supporting us on Patreon to get access to our exclusive Discord channel. And I'll catch you next time.